The studio was alive with its usual morning energy, bright lights reflecting off polished surfaces, the hum of cameras warming up, and the low murmur of crew members communicating through headsets. Lorraine Kelly sat poised on her pastel sofa, a calm anchor amid the flurry of activity, carefully shuffling her cue cards and smoothing the sleeves of her blazer. Today was meant to be another standard interview, part of her carefully choreographed routine of morning warmth and engaging conversation. But behind the scenes, there was a palpable tension in the air, one that even Lorraine could not entirely ignore. She was about to interview Rowan Atkinson, a man whose genius in comedy was matched only by his capacity to unsettle even the most seasoned hosts. She had interviewed him many times before, yet each appearance carried an edge, a sense that anything could go sideways, and quickly. As the countdown began, Lorraine drew a slow, measured breath, preparing to greet both her audience and her guest with her trademark charm. The theme music swelled, and the camera light blinked red. "Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the show," she began, her voice warm and confident. "We have an incredibly special guest joining us today. You know him as a comedic genius, a brilliant actor, and a master of timing. Please welcome the one and only Rowan Atkinson." The applause from the studio audience was immediate and enthusiastic, though there were nervous undercurrents, small murmurs of anticipation that suggested they, too, knew this could get unpredictable. Rowan appeared from stage left, moving with his familiar, measured gait, his face composed yet impassive. He carried that inscrutable expression that had defined Mr. Bean and Blackadder alike, calm, reserved, seemingly polite, yet always hinting at a mischievous intelligence behind those carefully controlled features. He nodded to the audience with a polite, almost imperceptible smile, then slid gracefully into the chair opposite Lorraine, folding his hands neatly on his lap. "Morning," he said simply, in that signature tone that could be warm, cutting, or both simultaneously. The simplicity of the greeting drew a few quiet chuckles from the audience, though most leaned forward in anticipation of what might come next. "Morning to you," Lorraine replied, her smile steady. "It's wonderful to have you back with us." "I'm pleased to be here," Rowan said, "though I suspect the purpose of my visit may be more dangerous than I anticipated." Lorraine tilted her head, curious. "Dangerous? Do explain." He gave a faint, knowing smirk. "I find that discussions about modern comedy often become heated, and I may have opinions that don't entirely fit the current climate." Lorraine chuckled lightly. "Oh, I'm sure we can manage that. We always try to be diplomatic here." She shifted her posture slightly, bringing her cards into view as if to signal a seamless segue into the first question. "Now, you've recently made headlines with some strong statements about the state of comedy. You mentioned that comedy today is terrified of offending people, which, as you've implied, can make it difficult for comedians to be truly funny. Could you elaborate on that?" Rowan leaned back, steepling his fingers lightly as if weighing each word carefully. "Yes, the issue isn't offense itself, offense is inevitable. Comedy's role is to challenge, to observe, to provoke. But now we live in a culture that expects every joke to be sanitized, pre-approved, and risk-free. That suffocates creativity." Lorraine gave a diplomatic laugh, but the tension in her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "Surely there's a balance," she said. "A little awareness and sensitivity isn't a bad thing, is it?" "A little awareness is fine," Rowan agreed. "But what we have now is a form of censorship disguised as sensitivity. Comedians are being pressured into making their work bland and safe to avoid offending anyone. That is what I object to." The audience murmured, some nodding in agreement, others leaning forward with uncertain expressions. Lorraine, sensing a potential opportunity to probe, pressed further. "But isn't it reasonable to avoid humor that is hurtful? Times have changed, and viewers expect a level of care and consideration." Rowan's brows lifted, and he regarded her steadily. "Of course, one should avoid deliberately targeting or harming individuals. But when humor is evaluated solely on whether it might upset someone, the entire point of comedy is lost. The very idea of being careful to the point of sterility is what I find absurd." Lorraine tilted her head slightly, the professional composure she usually wore so effortlessly now tinged with impatience. "Are you suggesting, then, that comedians should be free to offend anyone at any time?" "No," Rowan said deliberately. "I am suggesting that comedy should not be dictated by the most sensitive reactions or the loudest voices. People are capable of understanding nuance. Comedy should trust its audience, not condescend to them." The tension in the room ratcheted higher. Lorraine could feel the cold current of the discussion, the slight tremor of the audience, the shifting energy in the crew. She pressed, a touch of steel creeping into her tone. So, if you can't adapt to modern sensitivities, perhaps your style of humor is simply outdated. Rowan's eyes flicked to her, sharp now, though his voice remained measured. Outdated, perhaps, but enduring. My humor has made millions laugh for decades. It does not require constant apologizing or revision to suit fleeting cultural trends. The audience gasped, the reaction mixing shock and admiration. Lorraine, unaccustomed to being challenged so directly, felt her pulse quicken. She forced a polite laugh. I'm sure it has, but maybe what was brilliant decades ago doesn't fit the current landscape. Rowan's expression shifted subtly, the corner of his mouth tightening. Lorraine, I respect you, truly. But dismissing a lifetime of work because it does not conform to the latest wave of sensitivity is precisely what I mean when I say comedy is under siege. A few audience members nodded slowly, whispering among themselves, sensing the undercurrent of tension. Lorraine's smile was tighter now, the warmth masking a flicker of irritation. Well, Rowan, it's certainly an interesting perspective. Some might even call it controversial. Rowan's jaw set, his composure firm. It is honest, and honesty is often labeled controversial when it refuses to conform. The room grew quieter, the studio lights shining down like an accusatory glare. Lorraine's professional instincts battled with the sudden prick of frustration. She had faced outspoken guests before, but the calm authority of Rowan Atkinson's stance made her realize that this interview would not follow the usual rhythm. Every smile, every question, every laugh would need to be carefully measured against the weight of the words in the air. And now, Lorraine continued, her voice slightly strained but still composed, we'll be taking a short break. When we return, we'll continue this conversation and hear more about your new projects. The commercial break ended, but the tension in the studio had not eased. Lorraine Kelly returned to her seat, her practiced smile firmly in place, though her eyes flickered with a mix of irritation and disbelief. She took a deep breath, straightened her cue cards, and adjusted her microphone. The crew moved quietly around her, aware that what happened next would be delicate, and yet the anticipation in the air was palpable. Rowan Atkinson sat opposite her, composed as ever, his hands resting lightly on his knees, eyes calm but sharp, as if he were observing a scene that had been written for him, yet refusing to follow the script. He had not relaxed once during the break, the faint crease between his brows suggested he was ready to speak, to defend his position, or perhaps to escalate it, depending on how Lorraine approached him. Welcome back, Lorraine said, keeping her tone professional but edged with firmness. We're continuing our conversation with Rowan Atkinson. Rowan, before the break, you shared some strong opinions about the current state of comedy and the cultural climate surrounding it. Yes, Rowan said softly, his voice smooth, measured. Strong, perhaps, but necessary. Lorraine inclined her head slightly, a gesture meant to invite elaboration, yet laced with caution. Some viewers may find your opinions controversial. Do you worry that your comments might alienate your audience? He leaned forward, hands lightly clasped together. I don't believe honesty should be measured by its comfort. Comedy is a mirror. If the reflection is uncomfortable, that does not make the mirror defective. It makes the observer aware. The audience murmured, some nodding, some leaning back in uneasy silence. Lorraine's smile tightened, the tension coiling in her shoulders. She could feel the air in the studio grow heavier, the usual cheerfulness replaced by an almost tangible sense of confrontation. Rowan, she began carefully, while honesty is certainly important, there's a line between challenging people thoughtfully and being insensitive. Do you think you've crossed that line today? Rowan's gaze met hers directly, unflinching, and for a moment, the warmth that usually accompanies morning television seemed to vanish entirely. Lorraine, I am not here to offend without cause. I am here to speak candidly. If the truth offends, it is not my responsibility to soften it for comfort's sake. Lorraine's hands flexed slightly around her cue cards. But you've been quite direct in criticizing this show and its approach. Some might interpret that as disrespect, Rowan. How do you respond to that? He smiled faintly, a small twist of humor in the corner of his lips. Respect is earned, not demanded. I came here to discuss my views honestly, not to flatter. If that discomforts you, I regret it. If it disrespects you, that is a misunderstanding of intention. The audience shifted in their seats, some murmuring agreement, others audibly whispering shock at the tension unfolding live before them. Lorraine tilted her head, a flicker of frustration visible, though her voice remained calm. Rowan, I have always treated you with respect. I expect the same in return. He leaned back, crossing his arms, the posture one of quiet defiance. Lorraine, I have always respected you personally. But I cannot respect an environment where I am expected to parrot opinions I do not hold. If respect requires silence, then respect is meaningless. The crew exchanged anxious glances. The director's voice could be heard faintly in the control room, urging caution. The audience, sensing the intensity, leaned forward, captivated by the unfolding confrontation. Lorraine's professional composure was being tested like never before. She forced a measured tone, though the firmness in her voice betrayed the heat beneath. So you're saying you refuse to conform, even for the sake of decorum on this show? Yes, Rowan said simply, the word cutting through the studio like a quiet blade. I came here to speak freely. If that freedom is unwelcome, then perhaps I am indeed in the wrong place. Lorraine's smile faltered. Rowan, we invited you here to promote your projects, not to critique our show on live television. I am promoting honesty, he said calmly. And apparently, you consider that an offense. The audience reacted audibly now, gasps, whispers, nervous laughter, all of it layered with anticipation. Lorraine's fingers flexed against her cue cards, the carefully maintained grace beginning to show cracks. Rowan, if you continue this line of conversation, we may have to. To what? He interrupted, voice calm but firm. Ask me to leave. I see no reason to compromise truth for comfort. Lorraine's eyes narrowed, and her voice sharpened slightly. I am asking you politely to moderate your comments. This is a live show. You cannot just. I can, Rowan said evenly, rising from his chair. Because if my presence here requires me to lie or withhold my honest views, then I am better gone than complicit. The studio went silent, the kind of silence that makes even seasoned crew members hold their breath. Lorraine's mouth opened, closed, and opened again, searching for a response that would reclaim control. She had never encountered a guest so unyielding, so composed, yet so unflinching in the face of live scrutiny. The audience sat frozen, sensing the historic nature of the moment. Rowan Atkinson, the consummate performer, standing not to perform but